Across 92 studies, divorce's average effect on kids is small to moderate, not catastrophic. But how your child fares varies enormously, right? That is the massive, data-driven reality check every single parent needs to hear today.
And I want you to really hold on to that second part. If you're a separating or divorced parent with a child between the ages of 4 and 16, this explainer is specifically for you. Today, we are completely replacing that exhausted doom and gloom narrative with hard, actionable facts.
So where does this reality check actually come from? Well, it's rooted in Paul Amato's foundational 1991 meta-analysis of 92 separate studies. By looking at 92 studies, not just one or two, Amato established this unshakable scientific credibility right out of the gate. We're not just guessing here, you know? We're looking at the absolute broadest possible view of how children actually respond to family restructuring across the entire population. Which brings us to the big one, the question keeping so many of us awake at 2 a.m. Is divorce destined to damage your child? Listen, it is completely valid to have this deep, terrifying fear. You love your kids. You want to protect them. But to protect them effectively, we've got to answer this question with objective data, not with anxiety. Okay, so here's the myth. The myth is that the divorce itself destroys kids. That the mere event of, signing those final papers is the breaking point. But the reality, ongoing conflict and instability are the true drivers of negative outcomes. There's a massive, absolute difference between the one-time event of a divorce decree and the ongoing process of how your family restructures itself over time. To prove this, Amato actually followed up his original work with a 2001 update looking at 67 newer studies. And guess what he found? The exact same pattern holding true into the 1990s. The negative associations with divorce remain consistent, but they are modest. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. Modest. The evidence actually shows that resilience is the norm for these kids, not the exception. Most children of divorce fall perfectly within the normal range of adjustment. And as you'll see when tracking these outcomes across the decades, it reveals something totally fascinating. While you do see a little fluctuation depending on the specific outcome, the long-term trends prove that this whole catastrophe narrative just isn't supported by historical data. The negative effects persistently remain right there in that small to moderate range. Okay, so the crucial point is this. If the divorce label itself isn't the primary culprit, what actually is? Well, here are the active harm agents identified by the research. We're talking about ongoing interparental conflict, disrupted parenting, economic strain, and just general instability. These 4 factors right here, they're the actual active ingredients that shape a child's outcome. If you want to protect your child, these are the specific targets you need to go after. Now look, while we are absolutely decatastrophizing divorce today, we're definitely not going to sugarcoat the real risks either. We need to be totally honest about what the data tells us so we can be fully prepared as parents. No surprises. To really understand the long-term reality, we have to look at a 2017 systematic review by Sands and colleagues and just look at the sample size for their depression data. 21,581 individuals. I mean, that's enough people to fill a sports arena. This is not some small anecdotal survey. We are looking at hard objective data on a massive, undeniable scale. And what that massive data set revealed is an elevated risk of later affective disorders, specifically depression and, in some context, anxiety, in the offspring of divorced parents. But guys, it is vital to frame this correctly. Parental divorce is linked to an elevated risk, not a certainty. It simply means the vulnerability is a bit higher, which really just means our proactive parenting needs to be that much stronger. But what does this underlying risk actually look like right now, while your kids are young? Affective disorder risks in children often show up as new, unexplained fears, trouble sleeping at night, or just increased clinginess. These are the concrete, day-to-day behaviors you can actually watch for. It's essentially just your child's way of processing the instability of their changing world. Okay, before we go literally any further, I need to put up a massive flashing caution sign. Never diagnose your own child based on an explainer, ever. The findings we're discussing from these meta-analyses are population averages. They're correlational. They absolutely cannot predict the psychological trajectory of any individual child, including yours. If you notice that your child's anxiety is getting intense, if it's persistent, or if it's genuinely impairing their ability to function in daily life, like at school or with their friends, always consult a professional.
A true diagnosis and treatment plan require a qualified mental health expert. We're here to empower you with knowledge for sure, but we are never a substitute for professional clinical care.
All right, so how do we take all of this and build it into an empowered action plan for you? Now that we actually know the real risks and we've identified those active harm agents, we have to ask, what protective moves make the absolute biggest difference?
Think of me as your data-armed coach for a second here. The research points to 3 incredibly effective science-backed protective measures. Number 1, shield your kids from conflict. Literally, do not fight in front of them. Number 2, keep routines stable. Predictability is basically a literal shield against anxiety for a kid. And number 3, answer their fears honestly in a way that makes sense for their age.
Because the science is exceptionally clear on this. Low conflict, well-supported transitions are far, far less harmful. When you actively minimize the friction and maintain warm, supportive parenting from both sides, you measurably improve your child's long-term trajectory. You're literally changing their environment from one of threat to one of safety and resilience. And hey, if you're looking for a practical, immediate tool to help your kids navigate those nighttime worries and that clinginess we just talked about, structured play is incredible for processing emotion. Integrating supportive play gives them a really safe space to process everything they're feeling, because Fear Me Not helps kids conquer fears through science-backed play. Which brings us to our final thought. You now have the actual data to neutralize those active harm agents, and you have the tools at your disposal to support them through it. So, equipped with these facts, how will you step up to become the architect of your child's resilience today? Let's get to work.